Something a little different. I'm going to actually watch one of my videos that I just finished doing and just kind of look at and see, what I could have done differently. One thing that I kind of find a little bit funny is that when I do these things, like I feel like I'm so confident, and then I go out and watch it, I'm like, man, this is horrible. The way I speak, mannerisms, everything of that nature. So this video I'm going to sit here and we're going to go through this is the one that I just done for machining, and just kind of give me an idea of it, kind of go over what I'm actually doing here. So in this video, the first thing I'm doing here, you'll see is the saw. I'm actually got a automated saw by Kosen, and I'm looking for a piece of 1 7/16 material that I'm going to put up on the saw. And basically I will skim cut the very first cut on this thing, which you'll see me somewhat zoom in. Could have zoomed in a little bit better. But I'll zoom in, you'll see me make just a very nice little small cut across the front side, and that sets my 0 point. I program it in to do 8-inch pieces, because what we're working with here, these are actually getting cut into 8-inch pieces, and let it feed through and start cutting. The saw has been a very, very good saw for us. Man, it has made a huge difference. We've actually cut 45 pieces of 3/4 inch round bar at one time on there, and we just literally stacked them up, bundle cut, and we were doing a lot of conveyors, and that saved a ton of time. But yeah, this thing will set up and we'll just cut it and let it do its thing. When it gets done, we'll move on to the next process. But yeah, stay tuned for some more. Let's see what happens. Probably should shorten that clip up a little bit. It's a little too long, to be honest. I mean, how many times can you see somebody cut a piece of material? Really could have stopped at about 1 or 2. So taking note, trust me, taking note. All right, now here we're moving on to the CNC process and our CNC lathe. And what I'm doing here is I've actually got to change the jaws out, because the previous job I ran used a much bigger jaw opening. So I'm having to bring it down to the size. This 1 7/16 takes a much smaller jaw. Getting it all tightened up, making sure those things don't come loose. You see the machine doing a little bit of movement on the right, and that's actually for doing its homing position, making sure that it gets to home. Now, even though this is in the CNC, I'm actually manually just drilling this center spot here. I have to put the centering hole in the end, so when I go through and do the machining, as far as these things stick out, I have to make sure they're supported. So I use a tailstock. So you'll see here, I'll go through and just spot drill the ends of them. Just give me something to let my center drill, or my center, to run into. It's amazing how much machinery has changed over the last even 30 years, 20 years. I mean, even now, our stuff is pretty much extremely old at this point. They're late 90s, early 2000s machine. Still work great. We've had them for a long time, and really don't try to abuse them. I mean, they're not terribly clean. We should clean them a little better, but you know what? They do the job, they do the trick. We're doing our best with them, so we keep them up and running. We don't run them full out. Now I'm changing the jaws over here again. You'll see those little numbers kind of pop up. Each of these jaws has a number. There's a 1, 2, and 3. And so you have to make sure that when you put your new jaws back on your other jaws, you want to make sure that you put the right number with the right jaw. And I'm changing the jaws here because I'm actually not putting it all the way through. I'm going to put it only on about 1/4 of an inch to maybe 5/16 of an inch actually grab on the jaw. And then the rest is sitting out there in open space. And here's the center I was talking about. I bring this tailstock in, and here I'm going through and actually changing the program over, making sure I get the right program pulled in. Last thing you want to do is run the wrong program for the wrong part and destroy some tooling. Not a good day. So yeah, we're pulling in the program. Now I'm going to actually go over here and skim cut it and touch off the face of it. This way my machine knows exactly where it's at. And then here we are, we're doing some rough cuts here. This thing is going to do a bunch of passes on the rough cut, just getting down the size close to where we want to finish it off at. Now these parts are going to be a 3/4 6 taper, or excuse me, 3/4 6 Acme thread. And so we have 1/7/16, we've got a good bit of material we've got to take off. Now there the tool just switched over, and now we're actually going to a finishing tool at this point. And this will be our finishing pass for the finishing size. And then now we're doing the threading, which I have an Acme thread tool insert in there, and I think I've actually got it set at like, I can't remember, I think it's 40 passes maybe that it was set at. It's quite a bit of passes that I've got it going on. And of course I just check and make sure that, you know, the nut slides on there like it should and is not too loose or too tight. These things are not super critical. They end up blowing all the brass nuts off from overpressurization. But they very rarely go through these, but it's time for them to have some more in their stock. And man, I'll tell you, this coolant here it'll make a mess, and I'm trying to do the video where to make sure you can see everything. I got the door kind of cracked. Well, it's actually open a good little bit. It keeps majority of the water in, but there's still some getting out. I had a big mess in that, you know, when I got done with this thing, I had to kind of clean up a little bit. So now I'm going over to the mill. We just finished up the lay, and now we're going to be getting the tooling in the mill, making sure that we've got our tools that we're going to be using for our next process. We've now got to thin this backside down, and we've also got to drill the hole for the pin that they use, which is a 5/8. And here I am touching off the tools. Now you'll notice right here, I actually dropped that tool down a little bit more. And the reason I do that is so when I actually cut the first layer off and get that down to size, where I just touched my tool off at would technically be too high. So I had to drop down another 350 thousandths, because that's how much I'm taking off, and just drop that tool down so it knows that the 0 point is down there. Here's a bird's eye view. Not very great, but you know, you can see the table moving. I did learn some tricks that I'm going to try out on the next video and see if it does better. Machining away. You know, the good thing about these things is that they replicate the parts over and over pretty good, as long as you keep your tools, you know, your inserts, as long as you keep them up, don't let them get too warm, and they keep doing the same thing over. And it's less work on me or the machinist. You know, back in the old days, somebody was actually having to be over there on a mill and just taking these passes. And, you know, you've got, you know, feeders and stuff like that that help, but it's still very time consuming. This thing, you can, once you get it set up, you put a part in, you hit the button, you go. We're a little bit different than most machine shops this day and age. Everybody this day and age wants to have, you know, a big run of 1,000 pieces or, you know, plus. We are a job shop, so most of our runs, I mean, there are times that I do a couple hundred pieces of this, a couple hundred pieces of that, but honestly, I do a lot of 10 and 20, 30, and sometimes just 1 or 2 pieces. It's just how our business model is. That's just the way we've always done it. We've been around since 1980. Actually, 84, I think, is when it was truly started. My dad did. We've been in this location since 93. We bought it. In 94, we added on. So it seems to work for us. We're going to keep it going. So now I'm retouching the tool off again. I've already finished the one side. I've already flattened it down. I've drilled the hole. Now I've got to go back on this side, and I've actually got to flatten it down to get down to that 3/4 thickness. So this is technically the last machining process before we get to the deburring part. Apologize for the wipe there, but I had some coolant get on the lens there. And there it is, 3/4 thick. Go through and run the rest of these. Get them to the right depth, and then the last but not least, the most important part is going to be deburring everything, making sure you get all the sharp edges off, because when you get done machining this stuff, you'll get a nice sharp edge on a lot of these, and you just don't want to get cut on them. I mean, I do have numerous cuts on my hand where it happens, but basically for these, the best way to use and deburr is this angle grinder and a flat disc. Go through, hit all the edges, making sure they're just nice and smooth, nobody can get cut. There's nothing sharp or anything like that. All right, getting down to the end. Glad this job's over with. On to the next here in a minute. So the last but not least, we're going to deburr those holes and make sure we get those holes cleaned out very good for that 5/8 pin to ride through. And that's it. Roll through and do all those. So yeah, stick with me. Hopefully I'll get better at this. I'm learning, and we'll see where this thing goes. Catch you later.